Welcome to the Oh So Spurs podcast, where Ange Postecoglou has wound up his fist and sent a punch so hard into his doubter's face, he's sent them flying out of the ring into Rosette. And to discuss how he's achieved this today and debunk the myths against him on the show, we'll be discussing. I have Sai with me. How are you, Sai?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Recovered after Sunday, as you knew. We saw each other. I was hanging a bit after Saturday night, so I thought that was going to be a struggle. But the result certainly took the sting out of the hangover.
It was a beautiful day, despite it took 3 hours in a traffic jam to get home. But it was the happiest traffic jam I've had in a very, very long time. There is a happy traffic jam, and that is when you're just talking about Spurs with other Spurs fans in the car after you've smashed Aston Villa with 4 goals in the second half of a football match. So it was brilliant, wasn't it?
It really was. It really was. That second half was something else, mate.
It was. It really was. So, as I mentioned earlier, on the agenda today, we're going to be going over that performance. Also, we've had some questions from our members we're going to be going over. But also, we wanted to focus a segment of this podcast as it feels the right moment to look into the data behind the season so far, because there's a lot of stereotypes around Tottenham, I think, that came from last season. That kind of were fair assessments of the way we play, the drawbacks to how we play and the strengths to how we play, that this season don't add up with this season's numbers. And I think it's fair to say that once you get to that 10 game point in the league, you can kind of start to assess where you are as a football club and where you're projected to finish over the year. But let's start the game, shall we, Si? We're both at the ground. From the perspective of the East Stand, what did you make of it? And should we start with the first half specifically?
Yeah, I think first half was a little bit frustrating. I think Villa came to do a bit of a job in the first half. They were falling over like they were made of twigs, mate, in that first half. And the ref was going for it left, right, and centre. So it was quite bitty. It was quite stop-start. It almost had a little bit of a Crystal Palace feel to it, the bits of that first half, where I think Villa came to frustrate, and they did that. And there was some frustration around the opening goal as well. And I guess we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through.
Yeah, the opening goal, unfortunately, fell into one of the topics we'll be discussing later and looking into, into the stereotype of where Tottenham have, should we call it an Achilles heel? I know some people are listening and they'll be saying, it's not our Achilles heel. Look at the data. We know that. And we're going to agree with you on that slightly later on when we look at the data. But it did make that goal hurt more because you thought, here comes the narrative.
Yeah.
Here it comes again. Did you feel that goal was coming, Si?
I'll tell you where it felt it was coming. And it was the action that was before that corner when Vic came out and punched when he could have caught. There was nearly everyone around me up in the East Stand was like, oh my God, you got both fists to it really cleanly. Get hold of it and catch it. And then what compounded that is after we scored, Martinez did a couple of ones where he came out and really claimed the ball. And it's sort of, call it a weakness, but if there is a development opportunity for Vic, it's around that. How does he command that box and how does he catch the ball a little bit better? Because everything else about his game, I think, is sound. There's a little bit of a fallacy about the set pieces this season because, to your point, that is definitely a hangover from last season. And we've conceded from 2 corners, I think, this season, just the 2.
Yeah, it's 2 set pieces.
Arsenal and this.
Yeah.
And they're from 2 outstanding set piece teams.
Well, Villa are the only side with a better set piece record than Arsenal this season. So the 2 best.
And that wasn't Vic's fault. That wasn't Vic's fault. It was actually quite a good stop on the initial chance, I think. So, yeah.
When I saw it in the ground, I was stood quite close to I was quite low down and I could get quite a clear view of it. And we were saying, just look, I forget who was it. Was it Robert? Someone was on Vic, like, look at him. He's doing that bum shove thing on him. And no one's calling it up. And our own defenders aren't also getting involved enough to protect him there. So you could see it coming. But in recent times, you've seen referees offer a bit more protection to that. They've called up Arsenal on it and said it is impeding a goalkeeper. But you could see where Vic had got himself in a bit of a pickle there.
Yeah.
But you knew,
And I thought the ref was really strange on Sunday as well, because I thought overall he didn't have a very good game. There was loads
No.
that you could call him up on.
The ref, that
But
is.
the ref, yeah, absolutely the ref, because he was giving everything in the middle of the park. All you had to do was breeze past a player, both sides, not for Villa and against us, but for both sides. Every time a player went to ground, he was given a free kick. But in the box, it was like a WWE Championship fight.
Yeah.
He wasn't even pulling up. He had a couple of conversations with a couple of defenders, but he really wasn't looking at what was going on in front of Vic. This backing in all the time with the elbows, that is impeding the keeper. Whether we like it or not, it's impeding the keeper, and it should be penalised.
It is. I don't really like the pushback. I can see what people say it could be stronger, could have caught the ball, all that stuff. It's fine, that's true, but I don't think it's fair because you don't see this happening to other keepers. So it's kind of, you're still saying, well, that keeper has to play at a disadvantage to others in most of these circumstances, but still it's on them. They could do better. I'm like, well, that's not really fair. Let's have a fair judgment. Let's put all 20 starting Premier League goalkeepers in a game and say you're allowed to bum shove them all for this week. Yeah. And then let's see which keepers deserve to get their comeuppance for not being strong enough. And inverted commas, I just feel it's a bit. I do feel, and I know there's conspiracy theories all the time, but everyone's against your team. It always feels that way. Yeah. But this is one strapulation that I. But
there's now a narrative that this is an Achilles heel for us.
Yeah.
And it really isn't this season an Achilles heel for us. But the narrative from last season is still there. So the teams are still playing to that narrative. So we're still seeing a lot of this kind of activity every week. I think we're dealing with it much better. We didn't deal with it. We didn't deal with one incident of it yesterday against a team that's incredibly good at set pieces. And there's still more goals scored from set pieces than any other kind of play in the whole of the leagues. So it's not unusual to concede goals against the set piece.
Exactly. It's normal to concede. Is it like 3 or 4% of your corners or something? And we're pretty much on that kind of trajectory. Because there's, let's say, 10 corners a game. You can see the corner every 10 games. That's kind of the numbers you're looking at on average. So give or take. I haven't done the maths there, but you know what I mean. It's not like we're conceding 10% of our corners and we should be conceding 2 or 3. We are conceding around that single digit number. Yeah. In defence of Vicario, I think Stu's point he wanted to add is in that exact instance where he really lost control of it. It wasn't his fault. It was Porro flicked the ball on.
Yeah.
And then, he couldn't react from something that had been misdirected 2 yards in front of him. And then it was just a difficult one to handle. Who was saying he should have caught it? I thought that was really harsh. Say he should have caught that. He could have parried it better. He could have caught it in a perfect scenario, but I don't think it's one where you expect a goalkeeper to catch it.
Yeah, maybe.
It's more I'm getting at. But hey, let's just say it's not a calamity, but maybe let's not fully protect him and say he was completely faultless in it. It was just could have done a little bit better, but a bit harsh to overly criticise him.
Yeah, definitely.
You might be able to hear a drill in the background there. Sorry, my electrics are all being rewired in my house. But another thing from that game, Sai, was definitely the referee.
Yeah.
Villa were out time wasting from minute one. It felt like it was unbelievable the level of gamesmanship, should we call it? It put Arteta to shame, and it put Sean Dyche's Burnley to shame.
Martinez was time wasting from the first minute, and I mean, so obviously doing it as well. And when is this isn't just a comment about the game on Saturday, but when is the referee going to get a little bit of balls about him and book the keeper in the first 10 minutes for time wasting and really send a message, you can't do this, because the keeper will be gone. The keeper will be off if he does that in the first 10 minutes.
Well, exactly, and they should be punishing it. But they did kind of get their comeuppance in the sense that there was 10 minutes at a time, and we'll get onto that when they needed the game to end. But then that kind of shot us in the foot a bit as well, because our players are knackered thinking, got to get another 10 minutes just because you wasted all this. It's kind of a silly thing to do these days, because I find when you're in injury time, you're more likely to make mistakes. Anyway, it's a worse time to be it. So you're adding on that extra time in a game where you're trying to defend a lead. If you're winning and you're on time, you're almost better off being a bit more tactical about it and not wasting time in the sense that just adding to the clock.
Yeah.
at the end of a
The
match.
argument is, though, that the ball's out of play for longer when you're time wasting, so you're not running in that time, mate. That's the counter argument. But I think there's also the risk of injuries in injury time, perversely. You're more likely to get injured in injury time than you are to get injured in the normal run of the game early on, I think.
It's true. But let's look at the positives. That is the biggest sign of respect is when a club comes to play you and they're so scared that they just resort to trying to not let you play any football because they're like that. If we play football, we'll lose. So let's try make this game a 45-minute match over 90 and just keep the ball out as long as we can. And we might get something out of some luck. Like that's a good sign when a team who should be fighting for a position with you has to resort to that.
And they turn up with four central midfielders, with two up front, and one of those two up front is basically an attacking midfielder. So, and they sat all of their midfield with basically within the width of the two boxes, and were quite happy to try and push us out wide and defend us down the channel. So, yeah, that's why I think the first half was very bitty and it was very congested in the middle of the park, and we really struggled to get any rhythm going.
Yeah. It was. It summarised their game where McGinn's whole game plan was, as a number 7, get the ball, shield it, and fall on top of the ball
over
and get a free kick. It's like, is that really what your lion heart of your team has come up with in this big away? Before I was saying we need a personality like that in our team. I watched that game and thought, no, I don't want. That's not what you want against a rival away. I thought that was pathetic. Come on, show us your brave heart kind of attitude, McGinn. Like, stand up tall, show us you're a real player and why the Villa fans like you, and come at us and put a through ball that's going to cut open our high line. But no, he's going to fall on top of it. It just made yourself look like a bit of an idiot, really. But second half, stood in the concourse with my uncle and I said, we're going to get the Tottenham that comes out and just obliterates them, or we're going to get the one that very occasionally you had it against Palace in the second half against Brighton that you think we're not going to score. But we got the Tottenham that obliterated them.
Yeah, we did.
What were your summarizations of that second half performance then?
It was just so, I think if you look at the way that, I think there was a little bit of a tactical change from Ange as well, where he certainly the Doggy and Porro were staying a bit wider and not overloading that midfield. So that was starting to drag some of the Aston Villa midfielders out wide as well, which was creating a bit more space in the middle for Sarr, who, by the way, had an absolute stormer, was man of the match. Him and Solanke would have been having a bit of a struggle over the bottle of champagne for man of the match, I think, but certainly he was up there with it. And I think the fact that we got that early goal really set the wind in our sails, and that cross from Sonny, I mean, I'm sitting up the east stand, so I'm seeing it from behind his left foot, if you like. What a beautiful cross. You cannot defend those. Straight down that corridor of uncertainty, and Brenan Johnson there just to smash it home. It was a beautiful, typical Ange goal, right? So typical Ange goal, it's now a typical Spurs goal. And so that set us up beautifully. And then, Sonny getting hooked I think everybody was a bit surprised.
He was the most surprised.
Yeah, exactly. But, Ange's response to that in the post-match presser was, listen, I never intended him to play any longer, certainly no longer than 60, because he's just coming back from the injury. He didn't look like a player that was always going to get hooked at 55, 60 minutes when he came off, did he? He wasn't looking too happy. But, listen, we went on the 1-4-1. And then you got the Solanke story from there on in, really. He was an absolute giant of a player for us again, even before he scored the 2 goals. His work rate, his fight, his determination. Oh, mate, what a signing. I love the boy. I love him.
Yeah, he's been fantastic. And I'm glad he got those goals, because this ridiculous goal drought narrative started again, which drives me mad. And we'll get onto that one later as well. We go into the numbers behind where all that kind of stuff is just utter nonsense, and why our fans are moving the goalposts on stats to try and find negatives. So we've won 9-11. No, we haven't. We've won 4 in, what do they say? 4 in 20 or so, 15 or something. So what do you mean? Oh, I'm only talking about away games. No, we've still won more than that. No, just away league games.
Yeah, yeah.
There was still one more match, just away league games against top six. You're like, oh my God, stop looking for this
I
stuff to
know.
bash us with. It's
I know.
frustrating.
But do you think that's more, I don't want to criticize the online community because that's exactly where we're going with this, but do you think it's more fans away from the game than it is fans going to the game? Because I don't hear that sort of stuff around me from the season ticket holders that are around me. I don't know what do you hear in the South?
Most of them are pretty strong backers of Ange, and they don't. Typically, the South Stand, if we go behind, isn't this guy doesn't know what he's doing. It's singing Ange Postecoglou and all that starting, and there's a sense of joy and excitement when we chase a game rather than moaning. You just always get 1 in 100 people. Why is it always the same character of person? They're typically about the same age as well, and they it's always just that knee-jerk reaction, I think, to going down a goal and not being able to hold the emotion inside. I think we use the term bedwetting often in our WhatsApp group because there's always a half-time bedwetter every game. Someone has to bedwet, and it's always disaster, rubbish. We're never going to win anything playing like this, and da 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 and all that. And you just think, goodness sake, can you look at it over 90 minutes? Like, it's completely normal that you're not going to dominate 90 minutes of a football match every week. You're playing extremely good football sides here. I think there's more that I get the patches of people who they're not against Ange. They just can't control their frustration and they're looking for answers in those moments.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that, and it's very much the same up in the East End. I'm sort of looked towards the Park Lane end of the East End, as you know, and it's very much the same up there. But yeah, I just don't get some of the online stuff that continues to happen when we're on this run at the moment. 9 out of 11 in all competitions, top goal scorers in the league. What more do people want?
Oh, exactly. And it's like you need to win, as we said before, loads of times. 65 to 70% of your games in a season will win you the title on average. That will get you in most years. So that you can drop points 3 of every. And the best sides win somewhere between 70 and 90% of their home games. So our home performances are there. We're winning about 80% of our home games. Fantastic. Even against really good teams. And we should have got something against Arsenal. And it's the away games people are now digging out. But equally, even the teams in a relegation fight in the Premier League are winning around 30% of their home games, right? So winning away games is really hard. And that is the difference between going from 4th to 1st is moving the needle from winning 3 or 4 out of 10 of your away games to winning 6 or 7 out of 10. That's when you... But I think a lot of us, we don't think we're there yet. We're not expecting to be where Liverpool and City are yet. So we're quite happy to say, as long as I see a good performance and progress and when I know we're going to get to that position in the next year or two, I'm happy to go through the journey. But I think a lot of people are sick of waiting for waiting to get there. They're sick of the journeys. They want to be there now. And that is where they just don't have that patience to see this through.
Yeah. And sort of, I do get that. And, people pick out stats to support whatever they want. And I know we're going to go through a little bit of the stats, the season stats in a bit. If you pick out one to support your argument and don't take into account the others, when you take into the whole suite, and we'll go through in a bit more detail in a bit, it's a different story. But maybe just to finish off that second half was just lovely. Solanke's first goal, what a lovely goal that was. What an absolute delight, the little dink over the keeper. And then, Richie putting the ball in for Solanke for the third. And then Solanke winning the free kick for Madison's goal as well. Amazing. I just feel for Sonny, not for Sonny, for Richie, man. You know that I've not been his biggest fan in the Oso Spurs group. I've had my concerns from day one. But God, he comes on, he gives his all at the weekend, and then he pulls a hammy again. It's just so sad to see him, come on and do what he did, because I thought he had a great 20 minutes or so, and then he goes and does that while setting a goal up. I do feel for him, I really do.
Same here, yeah. You can never criticise his attitude as a player, really. He's always given it everything. And Brenan Johnson on the score sheet again. brilliant to see. Someone described him as a Moneyball player, and I thought that was quite a good description. Because I know he divides opinion on how good he is, but statistically, he's fantastic. And it kind of makes sense because you know what a routine Spurs goal is. It's that low cross into those two pockets just either side of the goal. But sorry, here knocking there. But Brenan Johnson is just the perfect player for that movement, right? And I think people say he's rubbish. He doesn't do 5 step overs and blast past his player, but we're not expecting him to do that, are we? He's just
Gets on
perfectly
base,
functional
mate,
for
doesn't
the
he?
system. Yeah,
He gets
he
on
just
both. That he's and he's started to do that naturally now. I think in the first season, part of our discussions and concerns, in inverted commas, if you like, with Brennan was that he looked a bit formulaic. That he looked like he was just trying to do what Ange was telling him to do. And this is part of Ange's philosophy. At the start, the players are doing stuff because he's telling them to do it. Johnson's doing it now because he believes in it. So he's making those runs. He's trying to take players on round the outside. And thought he stretched the Villa defence quite nicely as well at times on Sunday as well. But he's now playing like he believes that he can. He's doing it naturally, and he believes in the system, and he's making the runs. And that he just looked so quick. He was never going to miss that when that ball came across. Well, do you know what? I think me or you could have scored it. The quality of that cross from Sonny, mate. It was just fantastic.
It was. It was a beautiful Ange Ball game. It just felt like it was the system working despite missing a lot of players. Even when Davies came on and Romero was off injured, you felt the performances didn't drop off. Everyone knew their role. Everyone knew what they had to do. Fine, it was slightly less effective because the slightly less quality players were on, but it still works, and it gives you some confidence that you can go into the Ipswich game in a week's time, despite missing a lot of big names, with an opportunity to still come out of that with 3 points. Not saying it'll be easy. We've had these conversations before, but you feel like you're not on your knees in despair because you're missing 5 or 6 first-team players to an injury. Do you have anything else you want to add on the game side before we jump into questions?
Other than the fact that the fans were brilliant, the atmosphere in the ground at times was. I know I was talking to a couple of guys around me, and they were there for the City game, and they said that City was slightly better in terms of the overall atmosphere. But that's one of the best atmospheres I've had at the game. That was even better than the West Ham atmosphere. I think some of the noise coming out that south stand was immense.
Yeah, I agree. And it's the atmosphere definitely correlates to how well you're playing. And I think over the Conte years, Conte, Jose, and Nuno years, someone was slowly turning the noise dial down bit by bit every week, and now it's slowly cranking up again bit by bit every week with Ange, and it's wonderful to see. It was absolutely buzzing, and even John McGinn said it was the loudest he'd ever heard it. By the sounds of things, in an away game, it sounded like he was referring to. So that's a big compliment from a player who's probably a bit bitter about just being smashed in front of a lot of people. But some questions from the members. So David Purser says, curious about Jed Spence. His contract got extended, but we haven't seen him. What's going on? Start with that one, Si.
I think, isn't he still injured? He was flagged as doubtful for the weekend. I don't think there's nothing untoward there as far as I can make out from reading any reports. I think he's just getting over the injury. I don't think there's anything more than that.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I've read as well. Next part of the question from David is, the run of games after this next international break is brutal. Do we have the squad to cope? Which players and positions are you most concerned about?
Coming is brutal. Do we have the depth of squad? Which in some of the games where he's going to rotate, you definitely do include them in there in terms of the depth of squad to accommodate the different types of games. Where do we feel that there's a challenge? I think left back.
Mm-hmm.
That left wing back. That's irrelevant of the amount of games that are coming. That's a challenge anyway. And depending on what happens with Romero and Mickey, that centre half position looks a little bit vulnerable. Hopefully they'll be back after the international break, and that'll shore us up. And then we should have Odegaard back for him and Sonny and Werner on the left. That should give us enough. I think we might be a little bit lacking on the right.
Yeah, I agree. I think left wing back's the one for me that is just screaming out for some extra depth. But it's more complicated than that. It's the way it's the lack of homegrown players and club-grown players makes it a bit difficult. So it would be nice to find a solution to that left wing back position. Just add a rotation option for Udogie. Davies, by the way, just a quick shout out to him. We're talking squad players. he always gets this. He's missed a 7 out of 10. I thought he was 8 out of 10. I thought he was immense when he came on against Villa. We're very lucky to have him in the squad in times like this. And he's also just Mr. Calm, Mr. Coachable, Mr. Calm. He's that player on the pitch who you feel like the manager's been able to sprinkle a little extension of himself onto the pitch with a player who understands the tactics to a level he can remind players of where they should be and what they are doing. Almost like what Jordan Henderson was to a Liverpool side. So yeah, shout out to Ben Davies. What a player. Sean, the Gooner Slayer, says, if you could take one Tottenham player of all time to fit into Ange's team, who would you put in? That was his first question. And second, what are your personal expectations for the season?
Wow, that is a massive question. I saw it in the group chat earlier on, and there was a few names flying around. And it'd be easy to say Modric. I think HG give Modric a shout, absolutely. Someone else threw Bale into the equation. Bale would be immense on that left wing, without a doubt. But one that maybe a little bit left field, or maybe actually centre midfield. I'd love to see Van der Vaart in this team. I'd love to see someone with that drive, with that desire, who gets the team and is just, he became Spurs through and through in a very, very quick period of time, a very short period of time. I'd love to see Van der Vaart in this team.
Just wonder if he'd break down physically a bit. He wasn't
maybe
the sturdiest. Yeah,
but you'd love to see it, though, wouldn't you?
You would. Who would I go for in that team? There's some really great players we've had. We've arguably had the greatest right back in the Premier League history, and Kyle Walker. We've had Toby Alderweireld, Jan Vertonghen, Ledley King, wonderful centre backs. We've had Danny Rose, was a great left wing back on his day, but again, I don't think he has a ceiling as high as Udogie's is. Luka Modric, yes, but I'm not sure. I think Modric is my personal opinion. I think he's the best player ever played for him in my lifetime, because I didn't see the Glenn Hoddle era. Like he went to Real Madrid and they built a team around him for a decade, and he won, 6 Champions Leagues or something crazy. That's nuts. He's still doing bits at 39 now. But the most talented player for me was Bale. Just the most. A player. I think what this team of us lacks is the leadership and the player who just turns tough moments into moments of opportunity. And for me, Bale's the one player we've always ever had that I've seen. And Van der Vaart had a bit of it as well, where you were the worst team on the pitch and he went, I don't care, watch me. And everyone were like, what? And then the whole momentum of the game, you're 4-0 down in the Champions League against Inter Milan. And Bale just goes, not having it. Watch me.
Leave it with me. Leave it with me.
So
what about a prime Kane, though? Not the Kane that couldn't do the pressing. What about the prime Kane?
It's got to be up there.
And he's got to be, because he could press in his prime in the early Poch years. He could press, he could chase, he could do everything.
It's got to be up there, but the only reservation I'd have, and it's not a reservation with Kane, it's that Solanke is a good fit for the system, and he's only 27. So if you brought Kane in, you've got a wonderful situation of two awesome options. Kane obviously being the better one, it's Harry Kane. But I feel with Sonny being 32, to have a prime Bale coming through the ranks, Bale and Son as your options, jeez. Can you imagine having the choice of rotating between those two in big games? It would just be amazing. And you can play him centrally behind the strikers as well. So, and his pace, bloody hell. Just that's what you want in counter-attacking football. He'd just be off. So next question was from Ross. Would you rather fight 10 duck-sized Clive Allens or a Clive Allen-sized duck?
Is it? Yeah, but what sort of duck is it? Is it an aggressive mallard? Is it? I think I'd probably go for the duck-sized Clive Allens.
Said, how would Gareth Bale have fitted in? I think we answered that one very well.
Yeah, perfectly.
What else have we got here? One that says, what do you do to lift yourself out of a bad mood when Tottenham lose?
Oh, drink. I come on and do this podcast, and it sort of like puts things in perspective a little bit. Because otherwise I'd drown in a sea of despair, scrolling through X and WhatsApps and blah, 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 blah. Just put it into a bit of perspective. And listen, I get as hurt and as upset as anyone when we play badly and don't win. But, there's things in life that put it in perspective, and this podcast is one of them for me.
Yeah, similar. Talking it through, sleeping it off, playing off football, and focusing on the other things in your life that make you happy. for a day and then coming back to it with a fresh mind. I think that's all you can really do, really. It's always going to hurt. There's nothing you can do. That's why it's so good when you win. It's supposed to hurt. It's supposed to be painful when you lose. Otherwise, hey, you don't know what the experience is like of true joy when you win, because you know what the opposite side of that is, and you know how the opposition are feeling. That's what partly what makes it so joyous when you win. Howard says favourite current Spurs player and favourite ever Spurs player. Bog standard stuff from me, he says.
Let me go with the last one first. Glenn Hoddle, no doubt. Grew up watching Glenn, and 100% my favourite ever player that's ever pulled on that white shirt. Although I did see Diego Maradona at Ardiles testimonial play for us as well, which was interesting. But Hoddle for sure. Favourite current? Well, that's a really, really tough question because there's a lot in there. And I don't know if can you have a massively favourite current one just 18 months into a rebuild? But if I was gonna have one, I'm gonna go. My current favourite player is Mickey van der Ven.
Favourite all time? It's not even one of our best players, my favourite all time. It's just my favourite, Michael Dawson. Don't know why. Just loved him. Thought he was proper Spurs. And favourite in the current squad? I know a lot of people like Mickey. I do like him too. It's hard not to say Sonny, but I feel like Sonny's cheating a bit because it's Sonny. So I'm going to choose Sonny didn't exist. I really like Kulusevski, I think. Probably my favourite at the moment. Bit of an obvious one as well, but yeah, really like him. There's lots of likeable characters in that current squad. Like, there's no one in there that... I normally have a player in the squad that kind of gripes me a little bit. I get that a little bit of Madders, and I know people love him, and I feel a bit harsh saying that, but I just want him to cut out the thing where he's rolling around holding his ankle and the opposition have won the ball off him rather than getting up and trying to win it back. And going into doing like goading the opposition before a game, the day before on the social media, I hate that. It normally results in them just being even more motivated to beat you. But I like things about him as well, including that free kick. That's it, Si. I think we'll wrap up there, shall we? Be back for Europa League, maybe doing a watch long. We'll have to let people know as we get close to the time.
Yep, up for that. Yeah. If you're up for it, we'll see.
Yeah, should be good. Cool. Well, up Spurs.
Go Spurs.